This is a great opportunity for us to share with you some of the things we're going through, some of the things we'd like to see in Allegheny County and within your district. Once we get into the process here, we will have a question and answer period. I know we have a couple questions. I'm hoping, Congressman, you would indulge us and allow Legislator Gretchen Hanchett to take the first question, Legislator Stockin to take the second question. After that, we'll open it up to anyone's questions. If you're not sitting at one of these desks, we need to get you to a microphone to answer to ask your questions and answer. That's for the sake of the live stream, so they can hear you on the live stream and we can hear you in the room. If you do have a question from out in the audience, when you approach the microphone at the podium in the back, make sure you press the button on the right that turns your microphone red. Our IT director is standing close by in case we can't get that right. And please state your name, tell us your town, and if you're a municipal leader of some kind, what that is. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Congressman Nick Langworthy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I congratulate you on your leadership here in Allegheny County as you become the chair of the legislature. It's a critical role, and you guys are getting something right here, and it's really, really great to see. I want to thank so many people for coming out. The warm welcome I receive every time I come to Allegheny County, it means a lot, and it's an honor of a lifetime for me to represent this community, this county in the southern tier, you know, where I was born and raised in the United States House of Representatives. You know, I grew up sometime in Chautauqua County, sometime in Cattaraugus County, went to a little school called Pine Valley right on the line. Most of my family's in the Jamestown orbit. And, you know, the southern tier is a place that has been forgotten about by far too many people in this state, in this country, and we're going to change that. We're going to make sure that we speak with a very loud and clear voice about the needs of this community, and I will be certainly doing that in the halls of Congress, and if I have to bark at Albany a little bit, I'm happy to do that too. But we have a great team. I work very closely with your state senator, George Borrello, and the team, you know, at the Assemblyman with Joe Giglio, and we have had great representation over the years in this district. And if I can be half as successful as some of those members were on helping the needs here, I'll consider that a good day. But I think the most important thing, I'm back on district work period. So this is the second week of that. We'll have hit all 7 counties in the district during that district work period, because the most important thing I can do is listen to my district and what is on your minds. And, you know, I thought it was really important right out of the gates to meet with my municipal governing partners. You were on the front lines. You have all of the things that people come to you with because they know you're active in the government. They bring you their concerns, probably not just at that local level of government, but all across the spectrum. And there's a lot going on in this country right now, and I'll give a little overview of what I've been working on, what the first 6 weeks have been like. It's hard to believe it's almost March. But you know, the first week we had a little hard time electing a speaker. That went a little longer than I thought. You know, I had to say goodbye to my family after the first day and a half, and they came back, to Western New York before we continued to vote and vote and vote. And I ultimately think what the end result of that process was a net positive, because we have a more transparent rules package for the House of Representatives than we probably have in modern times. We're going to have bills that have single issue germaneness, so you don't have in a 72-hour rule to go along with that, so you don't have a 6,000-page bill being printed overnight and voting on it at 7 o'clock in the morning. That is not how our founders intended our democracy to function, and that's not how we're going to function in the United States House of Representatives. These omnibus packages where everything in the kitchen sinks in there and the American people don't know what you're voting for or against, and neither do the legislators, if they actually were being honest. That's out the window with this. And having that 3-day waiting period allows the members, their staff, and the public to digest what's in front of Congress. And I think that's critically important. I heard that as I was campaigning for this job. People don't like that idea of the former speaker saying, well, pass it to find out what's in it. And hopefully we make that ancient history with this. But as we figure out, I mean, it is great to be in the majority. And I think we have put some, agenda items on the board that have helped the trajectory of the country. One very proud of is that we've stood up to these emergency declarations. It's time, the American people want to get back to normal. Obviously, this pandemic, I mean, COVID is something that is now an endemic we're going to be living with and handling along the way. We're doing it quite well. It is not the major threat to public health that it was. In likewise fashion, it's time to start rolling back emergency powers. And we passed, some bills to do just that, one, go after the vaccine mandate that is hurt so many of our hospitals. Making medical workers have a vaccine mandate or their jobs are threatened. We passed that bill to repeal that. It is very important. I hear from our medical institutions all over this district, all over this state, and they say that their labor shortage is absolutely alarming, and this needs to end. So we have stood strong there. We're also it is time for us to have in our heads, how do we get as close to 2019 life as we possibly can, before the pandemic? How can we, our shopping centers are full, our movie theaters are full, our sporting events are full. America is ready to get back to normal. It's time for our workforce to get back to normal as well. And I was proud to co-sponsor and pass a bill called the Show Up Act, because 47% of our federal workforce is still working remotely. And there's no good reason for that. It is time to get our employees back into the office. It's been, my office in the last 3 weeks has been dealing with emergency passport applications from constituents who had travel planned. They applied for a passport the right way in the right time frames, but there's no passport. So they're having to spend more money, and we're having to get them an emergency appointment in an office in downtown Buffalo to try to get that passport so they can go, because there's not enough workers in the office processing these passport applications. So what we're hoping is that by passing these bills, and even if the Senate won't take action, it's putting pressure on the administration. And in the week that we took on some of these COVID mandates, ending the emergency declaration, I'm very happy that President Biden announced on May 11th he's ending the federal emergency declaration. And that should really, I guess 2 years after he said the pandemic was over, we're finally going to say the emergency's over. Let's get back to normal. And that's what I think so many people are really longing for is a return to normal. We have to address our labor shortages in this country. We have to, get people back to work and in the workforce and incentivize that however, we can. But taking on the COVID regulations was an important symbolic step, but we have other crises that the federal government faces right now. Our southern border, even though we're very far from that southern border here right now, this is affecting people in this community every single day, and it's because of the fentanyl crisis. And the southern border is the point of entry for the Chinese fentanyl that is killing so many people in this district and around the country. I'm very proud I was put on the House Committee on Oversight. And it's an investigatory arm of the House Republican Conference. Our chairman, James Comer, from Kentucky, is leading the way on some key investigations. But it's allowed us to have some hearings, to address a lot of things that I heard from people as I was campaigning for this job. The southern border was something that was discussed with me every single day by a citizen. And the fentanyl crisis and putting a face on it here at home is something that people consistently do, no matter where I'm at. I was at a meeting, like this in a diner last week, and I'm talking about the Chinese fentanyl and the southern border, and an elected official on the other side of the room stood up, tears in his eyes, and said, "I buried my son yesterday because he overdosed on fentanyl." That really brought it home for me, to see someone that, came here to talk about his role as a town supervisor, that it hit his house. This isn't something from a far-off land. This is right here in our backyards every single day. And the Border Patrol agents that we were asking questions of that day in the hearing told us that enough Chinese fentanyl has come across the border in the last year to kill the entire population of the state of Arizona 30 times over. That's a staggering figure. This is very deadly, and it's hitting people of all walks of life, the very poor, the very rich. There's not a segment of our citizenry or our economy that hasn't been affected by the fentanyl crisis. And we have to get serious about that southern border because of exactly what's happening here at home. We had the Border Patrol agents told us that 250,000 people, they encountered 250,000 in the month of December alone. Over the entirety of 2022, the estimation is 600,000 are considered gotaways. That means they're somewhere in the United States. We don't necessarily know who they are, where they come from, what their intentions are, or where they went to. That's like the entire population of Buffalo, Syracuse, and Rochester combined. That's a real problem. And we have to know who's coming and going. We need a comprehensive immigration reform, but you can't have it unless you seal our border and secure our border. You don't have a country if you don't have a border. So this administration needs to get very serious about this problem before it's too late. They caught 92 people from the terrorist watch list at the southern border in the last year. How many people that fit that bill are in the 600,000 that got away? We don't know. This isn't about Mexico. This isn't just about Latin America. It's about people that seek to do the U.S. harm, that don't like our way of life. This isn't all people looking for greener pastures or brighter futures. There's some of that. It's also highlighting the absolute worst of society, the human trafficking, the people that are, profiting at the expense of people that do want, to come to this country, for a better life, that they're taking their money and some of these people end up dead. The atrocities are absolutely off the charts, and to hear the Border Patrol agents talk about how they don't have the tools to get the job done, that is a dereliction of duty. Another dereliction of duty I see in our news every single day is what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio, and the derailment that happened there in the subsequent aftermath. I think is a great embarrassment for our federal government, because the president's off to Ukraine. Meanwhile, we have people suffering because of decisions of government that have taken place there. I mean, we need to make sure that we support that community. That community looks an awful lot like all of New York 23. It's not glitzy. It's not, it's kind of economically had some tough times, and there's a whole lot of people that want to pretend like that wasn't happening because it's not a convenient headline for people trying to say the world's going in the right direction. Those people matter, and we need to be there to support them every single step of the way, making sure that their drinking water is safe, that their air is safe, that their homes are safe. And I look forward to when we're back in Washington to locking arms with my colleagues from the state of Ohio to see how we can assist and help, and make sure with my colleagues in New York and governing partners at all levels that never happens here. And whatever safeguards have to be in place to protect our small communities that happen to have rail capacity coming through there, this cannot happen in our community. I also serve on the House Agriculture Committee, and it's going to be a very critical committee in this Congress because this year the Farm Bill expires, and we have to pass a new Farm Bill in the next 5 years, and we'll be we're just kicking off this committee's work. I mean, we're a little bit behind schedule, unfortunately. The speaker vote did take a toll on some of our legislative action, but we have to get a farm bill done by September. So we're going to be moving at a rapid pace to make sure that, working hard, we're delivering for our farmers and our agricultural interests, throughout the southern tier and throughout this district. I'm very, very lucky to have the chairman of that committee I share the Pennsylvania border with. G.T. Thompson is the chair of agriculture, and he's just on the other side of the Pennsylvania line. And he knows what our agricultural needs are, because they're not very different than his in the state of Pennsylvania. So we're going to be working together a lot, and I'm sure we'll get him up to the district. He told me, I could work your district and mine on the same day. So that'll be a terrific partnership. But that is, we have to be there for our agricultural interests and needs. It is so important to our economy. And I don't need to tell anyone in this room what agriculture means. But the Farm Bill, this is the Super Bowl of agriculture policy, and we have a seat at the table as we're crafting this bill to make sure it fits the needs of this community. Also honored to be selected by Speaker McCarthy to be one of the 9 Republicans that serve on the House Committee on Rules. It's a very unorthodox assignment, but every single piece of legislation has to go through the House Rules Committee to decide how it will be debated, which amendments will be offered, what time there is going to be available for that debate in those amendments. So that is a very important committee. It's one where we see firsthand what the debate will be before things really get started, because the committee chairs of the committees of jurisdiction of the legislation, they come before the Rules Committee to argue on behalf of their legislation. And we get to ask them unlimited amounts of questions about the bill, about what's in it, what's the purpose of it. And it has been an extreme education for me in just the first few weeks on the job. It's an assignment, it's time consuming, but it puts you in the front lines on the entire legislative agenda of what's going on in the House of Representatives. So I think it's going to allow me to develop greater, stronger relationships and help this district even more by being on this committee. See, before we get into questions, China. China is something that is on, I think, everybody's minds. The spy balloon put it on the front page for the whole world to see. One of our first actions as a House majority was to create a select committee investigating the Chinese influence in American life. They're infiltrating our institutions. I mean, they're our greatest threat, both internationally and domestically. And we have to be prepared to defend America. And I'm not saber rattling here. It's probably, we're in a Cold War, whether we'll acknowledge that publicly or not. We are in an economic Cold War every single day. They're addicted to our money, and we've been addicted to their cheap stuff for far too long. We stopped making things in many places in this country because we like their cheap stuff. And that's got to come to an end. We have to make things in America again. We have to support American manufacturers. I was just in Elmira at a company called Hardinage, and they came to visit me in Washington, D.C. They, on their own, without federal or state incentive, brought 50 jobs from Taiwan and brought them back to Elmira. And I thought that story is just a remarkable one, an example to this entire district, to this entire state, and to the country for that matter. We can do it here better. And the supply chain crisis has put it on full display. I mean, you all, I'm sure, running this county's government had a hard time getting masks and gowns and everything for our hospital workers at the height of COVID, because it all had to come from the Far East. And they put it all on lockdown. And I think people are more aware of where their goods come from, where their food comes from, and we have to be more vigilant as Americans, fighting, because this is a patriotic duty to make sure that we make as much here in America and support American workers as much as we possibly can. Chinese espionage is something that we've been hearing for years. They steal our intellectual property. They're completely dishonest brokers on the world economic stage. Obviously the origins of COVID, we'll never know the straight answer on that, but we're going to ask some tough questions this year. So hopefully Mr. Fauci hasn't gotten completely settled in retirement, because he'll be coming back. But the reality is We have to be vigilant in this economic battle, and hopefully it just stays economic. But having that balloon cross the entirety of the United States is not the right message to send to the world stage. I mean, we showed a weakness in allowing that balloon, and if not for someone in Billings, Montana, looking up at the sky at the right time, maybe we wouldn't have known it was there. But once we did know it was there, and I had my colleague from Myrtle Beach, Russell Fry, who's a fellow freshman, he's sending me pictures he's taking with his phone of the Chinese spy balloon with the naked eye just flying over the beaches. The challenge to American sovereignty cannot be tolerated. And we have to practice peace through strength. Our adversaries are going to challenge us even more based on an episode like that. It should have been shot down immediately, no matter what was on it. There's plenty of open sky over the far west where that balloon was. We cannot allow that to happen again. But now we're overcompensating and shooting down, hobbyists, weather balloons. We have to use our intelligence community. We have to use the might of the American military to protect our country. We cannot afford another episode like this on the world stage. What I think is really important is how can I help Allegheny County? And you're the best at the front lines of this discussion. I mean, there's obviously, big picture national policies, but I want your input, your governing partners, your people that are on the front lines every single day talking to your neighbors as to how things going on across this country affect them, but also like what key investment projects make sense for people here in Allegheny County. There's some in my party that are opposed to what they call congressional earmarks, which are investments by the federal government that are put in the budget by members of Congress for their districts. I'm not. I'm just going to be really crystal clear with you. I am a strong proponent of earmarks because when Republicans got rid of them in 2010 when they took the majority, spending did not go down. The Obama administration still spent just as much money, but a bureaucrat somewhere in Washington, D.C. made the decision as to where the money would go. I want to work together with you to decide what we're out there fighting for and where that investment should be, because we need to be investing in our critical infrastructure and we need to be investing in order to create good-paying jobs here in Allegheny County and throughout the southern tier. That's my governing philosophy on the matter. I want the government to, the federal government to be as small and as efficient and spend the least amount possible. But once the pie is set, I want to fight for the biggest piece for this community that I possibly can, and work with you to get things done for people and to help create jobs for them, down the road. And I'll end with this. There's a big discussion coming on the debt ceiling. I mean, it's going to be the elephant in the room until we get it solved. We obviously are going to have to lift the debt ceiling. The president wants a clean bill, no negotiation, no discussion. That's not going to happen. We have divided government. We were elected into a majority for a reason. We've spent $5 trillion in the last 2 years. Happy days are not here again. I mean, the piper is going to have to be paid, and we're now $32 trillion in the hole. Our grandchildren's grandchildren can't pay off the money that we've spent in just the last few years. We have got to bend the curve on federal spending. We've got to get on, at least a schedule to get towards a balanced budget. And that has not been the case in the last decade or more in Washington, D.C. There has just been far too much spending. Some of it during extraordinary times required extraordinary measures. But we can't be all things to all people in perpetuity. It doesn't work that way. You run out of other people's money at some point, and that's how great empires crumble. So we have to stand strong. We have to get spending under control, and you can't tell me that if you spent $5 trillion in the last 2 years that we can't find some areas to start the trajectory in the right way. There'll be a lot of misinformation out there and lies about, my position and my colleagues in the majority's position on Social Security and Medicare. I will tell you this, and I will say this everywhere I go. I will not, vote for something that cuts benefits to Social Security and Medicare. it is off the table. The Speaker of the House took it off the table prior to sitting down with the President for the first time to discuss the situation. Yet you turn on television and there's ads attacking members of Congress for attempting to cut Social Security and Medicare. It's just a patent lie. And, we will fight fire with fire in that public policy discussion. Not going to take that lying down. And, the key to success is to work together, not to run around and scare our senior citizens that they're going to lose their benefits. Social Security and Medicare were a promise and a contract made to the American people that paid in their whole lives. And I will stand strong to keep that promise and keep that contract intact. So I would love to take your questions, Mr. Chairman, of any of the members or that are here, of the legislature, or town supervisors, or mayors, whoever's here that wants to have a discussion. We got our Lee James from our team. I was very fortunate. She stayed on and is on our team, working out of our Olean office. I know she's no stranger here in this room or in any room in the Southern Tier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Congressman, for those words. And if you join me in a round of applause. Congressman, I owe you an apology. You had asked for introductions.
That's okay.
And true to form, all I did was introduce myself. So can we take a couple minutes very
Absolutely,
quickly?
it'd be very helpful.
Let's do it this way. Let's start at the dais here. If we could start at the far right, just introduce yourself. Tell us your interest and your position with the county or with the municipality.
Brenda Rigby-Reilly, and I'm clerk of the board for the county.
Kevin Fred Demick, District 1 Legislator.
Carissa Knapp, County Administrator.
Allison Carroll, County Attorney.
Terry Ross, County Treasurer.
Philip Stockton, District 1 Legislator.
Gretchen Hanchett, District 2 Legislator.
Dwight Mike Healy, District 2 Legislator.
John Rickey, District 2 Legislator.
Bob Jones, Supervisor of the Town of Angelica.
Randy Shaler, Mayor of Wellsville.
Mike McCormick, Board of Elections Commissioner.
Gary Barnes, District 4 Legislator.
Stephen Havey, District 4 Legislator.
Jan Burdick, District 5 Legislator.
Thank you. And since we don't have too many people, can we do the whole round?
Please do.
Okay, so maybe start with you, Undersheriff. Would you be willing?
Walt Becky, I'm the Undersheriff.
Lee James, Langworthy, staff member, Olean, and also Town U.S. Supervisor.
Brent Reynolds, Republican Election Commissioner.
Who's next?
And in the very back?
Oh, just me. Jeff Sager. I work for a court at a community action agency now.
Hi, Leslie McPherson, and I also work for a local
Thank you. And then wrapping right around underneath the window, please. Thank you.
Bill Gal, Congressman Langworthy's office.
Casey Jones, Allegheny Health.
Okay, did we miss anyone? Deputies, also welcome and thank you for being here today. Okay, Congressman, if we may, I'd like to start with Legislator Hanchett. I'm going to introduce her, and then I'm going to let people introduce themselves, and we'll get rolling here. But Legislator Hanchett?
Congressman, thanks for coming and giving us this opportunity to ask questions and to listen to what we have in mind. I'm trying to figure out a way to get my 4 questions into one, but I will keep it clean.
I'll indulge you. I promise.
I'll send you the other ones. There's plenty of people that have questions here. So my question is, there is no one-size-fit for all economic development strategies for rural communities. How can local leaders, including governments, businesses, and individuals, put rural regions on track to thrive? And will there be incentives to drive businesses to rural regions? And I know that you talked about the subcommittee that you're on agriculture. It's all-inclusive of who we are along with others. So thank you.
Yeah, what is amazing is there's a lot more to the agriculture committee than cows and farms.
I have it written down here.
I've got a meeting on Monday to discuss cryptocurrency, which comes through the Agriculture Committee on, the commodity side of things. That's one of my subcommittees. This is kind of the classic challenge that this region's had for far too long. Really, all of upstate New York faces this challenge. I mean, and we have, a state government that doesn't make anything any easier. I mean, it's an impediment to growth. It's why we've led the country in the brain drain. We spend a fortune to educate our young people, and we, then put them in world-class colleges and institutions that, a lot of our tax dollars subsidize as well. And then they go somewhere else. And we send our best and brightest elsewhere because they want to go places with more economic opportunity, more personal freedom, more economic freedom. Maybe some of those states that have a 0% income tax might be getting something right. As a high-tax state with a tough climate, we have real challenges. And as site selectors look at where to place jobs and where to place factories, and we have to, be on our absolute A game. And I want to be a full partner, with all of our agencies here in Allegheny County, because as there's now a $40 billion Micron microchip plant being built in Syracuse, there's a lot of spinoff that comes from something that big. And there's hellish amounts of subsidy at the state and federal level to create a plant like that. We have to be prepared to meet the moment. But, cheap energy is something that we should be able to be putting online now. Our state government won't let us. In the ground right now, as everybody in this room knows, we have safe, cheap natural gas. And it would transform this economy and bring more jobs than we could probably fill. And the Pennsylvanians enjoy it. It's transformed their economy. And the people in Ohio have enjoyed it. And it's transformed their economy. And we get left holding an empty sack time and again. And I'm going to take every opportunity that I can get to fight for people to change their minds. And we had a bipartisan meeting with Governor Hochul. She came, and she was kind enough to come to Washington, sit with members of Congress from all across the aisle. Everybody got to ask questions of one another. And I figured I'd start off and I'd commend her on, I'd say something positive, because I was kind of surprised to get invited, to be honest. But I said, I want to salute your handling of the blizzard. I think you shut the state routes down as quickly as you possibly could, and you probably saved some loss of life. I said, but as long as we're talking about a blizzard, I really hope you'd take this opportunity to reevaluate your energy policies. I said, because safe, cheap, clean natural gas, dependable natural gas that doesn't go out because the electricity goes out, saved a lot of lives in Western New York over Christmas. I said, we lost almost 50 people in the Buffalo area. I said, but if we had your electrification agenda online now, you could have at least added 1 0 to that total, maybe 2. I said, that's something that we can't take lightly. This is all well and good in a laboratory and these bright ideas and these climate regulations that are coming down, and they're grinding economic development in some places to a halt as companies look in here and say, I can't live up to this by 2030. And neither can technology, for that matter. But I said, Governor, we have safe, cheap natural gas in the southern tier and some of the poorest areas of the state of New York. And with a stroke of a pen, you can help us transform the economy of a region that we both work for. And she told me she'd take it under advisement on maybe changing her mind on some of these climate and energy policies. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But because you see the war on gas stoves and natural gas hookups, and the Buffalo television station Channel 2 is doing an expose tonight at 11 as to what these climate policies of Albany would do to a home after 2030 if you had to replace your furnace. So if you're on the fence and having to get a furnace replaced now, I trust there'll be some revisions before this is said and done. But you may want to do one so you have a brand new one before this comes in, because they're talking about geothermal heat pumps. I mean, things that are going to cost more money than some of the houses in our communities here are worth on the open market, and it's going to further drive people away. What I will do in Congress, I will fight harder for funding for rural broadband. I think that is the connectivity needs to be there. I know you guys have done what you can. We have, some of these COVID monies that have people, different communities have looked at using to increase rural broadband. But, if we're going to have health delivery by telemed, we're trying to attract businesses of the future. They need predictable broadband access. It is now, the way of the world. It's also important for our tourism dollars because as you're trying to attract money from elsewhere, people expect to have cell reception and internet access when they come to visit, and we want them to come here, and we want them to come here frequently and spend their money and fall in love with the beauty that the southern tier has to offer. But it's a huge issue for our site selectors. And access to natural gas and energy is a huge issue. So, I'll be fighting the Green New Deal in Washington, but we also have to be vigilant and be vocal, and we need the legislature to be vocal against the policies of Albany. Your assemblyman and your senator are fighting against it, but they need to hear from all layers of government that this will make our community unsustainable if you're going to force these mandates down on individual homeowners. I mean, there's people that are struggling to make ends meet and pay their bills now. What is it going to be if you say, oh, you can't, I just, my mother's still, she's not on natural gas. She's got propane. I know what it costs to fill that tank. It's crazy. And, the fact that we could expand natural gas and we won't is insulting to the people of this community. That's a long answer to a short question, but it's one what we all have to work together on.
I'll send you my other questions.
Absolutely, or we'll come back around too.
No, I don't.
Thank you, sir, and welcome. The New Yorkers have a herd of elephants in the room, and one of them, I haven't mentioned a lot, is the whole Medicaid payment issue right now. And we're all familiar with what the governor has put out in her budget and her intent to keep all the money that's supposed to be coming to us. My question is from the federal level. We were very, very happy when all the ARPA money came directly to us and not bypassed through New York State. And is there anything that they can do about that as part of that? And the second part is, what can the New York delegates in Congress do to help change this around? Because this is a game changer for all of us with property taxes.
It's a serious problem. I think it's somewhere like 2.8 million here for Allegheny County. That's real money. I mean, in a bean counter in Albany looks at that as it's only a couple $1 million. They don't understand what that means to the property tax base here. And it's going right back to the property taxpayer. And they're going to do this, I think Chemung County's $4 million, Steuben County's $4 million, I think almost 3 here. I mean, that is a huge piece of the puzzle. The minute we found out about this, we got in touch with NISAC and started working with them. And Congressman Molinaro, who ran for governor a few years ago, he was Dutchess County executive. He's got all the passion of county government at the job every day. So he and I wrote a letter, and we got our colleagues to sign on to the letter from our delegation to Governor Hochul saying this money was appropriated to alleviate the burdens at the county level. And it's wrong for you to seize these funds, and please, cease and desist. We have not gotten a response yet, but we're going to be pressing that matter. And I think this is another thing where we've got to get a little more attention on this from members of the media, particularly television stations, because I haven't seen a story about it yet. It's kind of like a ledger balance sheet thing as far as they're concerned now, but we've got to tie this to what this means to the individual citizen and taxpayer here in Allegheny County, what this arbitrary decision by the governor in her budget would do and how much it would drive up property taxes. And we've got to tell a story that way and shame her into doing the right thing. This is affecting people all over the states, and the state got so much free money rained down on them from the federal government. I mean, we have printed money like it is just a hobby at this point. And the balance sheets were flush. I mean, remember, Andrew Cuomo had an $11 billion hole before the pandemic. and hadn't figured out how he would even address it in that year's budget. And then he was saved by the bell by COVID because no one discussed it anymore. They passed a budget. There was a huge federal bailout. Obviously, we had to respond based on what happened in the pandemic. But this can't be let to stand. And you have a full partnership in me to see this through. And she's got to see the error in the ways. Passing bad decisions down. I mean, they pepper you with mandates continually. And for them to come in and now take the piece of federal money that's intended to support our counties and our county property taxpayers, it's just patently unfair. So I hope we don't have to get into a legal discussion, but unfortunately, too often in the state of New York, we have to go to court to get satisfaction. So we'll be working with you every step of the way. Yes, sir.
Gary Barnes from Wellsville. I agree with 95% of what you had to say.
Okay.
One thing that I object to, and that is earmarks. I've seen some that before they eliminated that, there were some that were absolutely ridiculous. I could only support the continuation of or the resurrection of earmarks if there's a way of getting the stupid, ridiculous ones pushed aside.
Pelosi brought them back, so we've had earmarks. And the question we asked as a conference of ourselves is, what would our position be? The Senate certainly is doing the earmarks. I agree with you on Bridge to Nowhere, and we saw the horror stories that led to Republicans getting rid of them. But that also, I mean, if I don't get to go put our stamp for this district on X amount of dollars, do you think someone in Washington, D.C., that's part of this administration is going to fight hard for Allegheny County to get some important water infrastructure? Do you think that the worldview of this community and the political, dynamics that currently exist in this country, that they're like, we got to help those people in the southern tier? And I'm not declaring myself any, savior here. I mean, far from it. But I know that I'm accountable to all the residents of this district. And if I pass something stupid, I will be held accountable by those residents. I mean, I've seen some really awful ideas come forward, but that's why we're going to have a process and why there's transparency. I do believe these will be heavily scrutinized, and they have to be germane to the bills that we put in them. I mean, I once upon a time, one township that's in my current district, a past member that I worked for, decorative clocks. I'm not fighting for any money for decorative clocks. Critical infrastructure, water projects, sewer projects, things, that we need, to help grow our economy, and take the burden off of property taxpayers. Those are the kinds of things that I want to work on. So, I'll certainly look at any applications. We haven't set a process in place because we haven't been given a process yet from the speaker. But, we're just going to put that application out to our municipal partners and say, what's important that, you need some help with. And we'll figure out if there's a federal component, a federal tie-in, and if we can work together to find some money. And there's no guarantees. I might not be able to get something funded this year for what you're looking for. Doesn't mean we won't try. But I totally agree with you on the waste. I mean, you see horror stories every year. And the committee chairs have a lot of power, especially in that appropriations committee. Those very senior people, they call them cardinals. They have so much power. And they can get any damn thing they want through there because other people need there. But at the same time, you don't want to turn these decisions over to unelected bureaucrats completely because, ultimately they're accountable to no one and you'll never see their face.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Congressman, my name is Bob Jones. I'm the supervisor of the town of Angelica. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank Chairman Harris for the invitation. And I'm here for money.
Okay.
In Angelica, we're working on a water project. We have very limited resources. It's going to be about from $4 to $4.5 million. The engineers have it now, and we need money.
Okay. We'll be happy to sit down with your team and look
Sure.
through, once your engineers have everything in place. I mean, let's.
I was going to deliver a letter by hand to you today.
That's great.
My engineer says, no, don't do that because they do everything electronically.
It's important to have that discussion. I'd love to come out and, one of my next trips, maybe see some of your issues up close.
And as far as the Chinese are concerned, I do not understand why the United States government allows the Chinese to buy up the amount of farmland, buildings, and industries in our own country. I don't get it.
It is, and you point out something. I'm working actually with Harriet Hagerman of Wyoming on a piece of legislation on this. I mean, there's a few bills. The legislation is probably more critical state by state on prohibition of the foreign purchase of land, because obviously we don't handle a lot of real estate matters from the federal level. But I know some good governors have come forward. I saw a lot of interviews kind of back to back. Glenn Youngkin was on TV and Kristi Noem. I mean, they are passing legislation in Virginia and South Dakota to prohibit the acquisition, especially of our agricultural land. And we should, in so many of these agricultural lands that the Chinese are buying up are way too close to our military installations. I mean, we're the breadbasket of the world. We shouldn't be yielding our agricultural territory to any foreign entity. I'm sorry. They want to invest from an American perspective, great. But, the one thing that I think we learned during COVID is food security is national security. I mean, I don't ever want to hear that we can't get foods because there's a war in the Ukraine. America can make enough food for our whole country. We can grow it, and we can feed the world too. We're paying farmers to not grow, and that's got to stop. And I'm really looking forward to getting a lot more educated through the Farm Bill process about all the different segments of our agricultural industries. But we have to protect not just our local smaller family farms, but also, so many of our, agribusinesses that, feed the country. Selling prime farmland to China, I mean, it's an economic death wish. It's dangerous. It's a national security matter. Just like, this comes down to local decision making. Governors should be putting prohibitions and moratoriums immediately on this. This would be a no-brainer to do. And the same goes for And listen, you got supervisors in the room, mayors. You're the boss. You are accountable directly to your taxpayers. What New York's done, blowing through local zoning on wind and solar in the name of this Green New Deal agenda, is embarrassing. I think it's highly illegal, and I hope it's challenged as far as we can. Because the fact that you can have you go buy your dream home or build your dream home, and 3 doors down, the next year, all of a sudden there's an industrial solar farm, that's just wrong. And it's all at the expense of agricultural territory. Once it's gone from the agricultural rolls, it's never coming back. Once you put these solar panels on there, it's going to end up being treated like a brownfield when it gets decommissioned. And who's going to be there to decommission it and pay the bills? And I believe far too many of these green energy companies are taking advantage of our communities that are down on their luck. If a supervisor and the town board decide we want 1,000 windmills, God bless. That's your local decision to weigh in on that. But the fact that it can be done under your noses now is just un-American. And we should all be standing and be very vocal on this, because the profiteers will come in. And if it fits what you're trying to accomplish, I salute you for having a vision and a decision, and you're accountable to your neighbors. But for some guy in Albany to be the one to have the say over this, because the governor put it in a budget and it got voted on in the middle of the night, that's just not fair to our local taxpayers. That was a segue, I'm sorry. Who else has got something on their mind? Gary?
I never run out of questions.
Good.
But the southern border issue, bugs me, and it bugs. I can't imagine anybody that thinks that it's going great down there. The governor of Texas has come to the point where he's busing people all over the country because they can't handle them, and some of the rest of the country, New York City, and so far it's mostly big cities. But I can see the day when they're going to ship them to Allegheny County. What are we going to do with that?
In Jamestown, there's a serious issue. I mean, Senator Barella was on Fox News talking about it. I mean, there's families from Columbia that have found their way to Jamestown, and 35, 40 families. I mean, the county executive is at a loss as to, how do they meet the services, and in the grand scheme of things, based on what you see on television and what I know from seeing with my own two eyes in New York City, it's a small number, but in terms of stress on the system, it's a big problem. And it's just amazing that these people that wanted sanctuary cities and wanted to declare New York a sanctuary state, now they're crying foul when they find their way to New York City. The problem is elections have consequences and their policies have consequences. And now people are seeing this in real time as to what the effect is. It's going to affect everyone's quality of life if you've got an idle, homeless, illegal immigrant population in your community. But, at the same time, now we're talking about the mayor of New York asking for billions from the federal government to handle the problem that the president created through inaction at the border, but the New York City and the New York State government embraced by their policies of allowing them in. I mean, the fact that, there should never be a homeless veteran if we're buying hotel rooms for illegal immigrants. I mean, there should never be a homeless veteran, period. But the fact that there are while this is going on, it's staggering. And I'm looking forward to getting a trip to the border soon myself so I can see it with my own two eyes. There's got to be, something's got to give. Obviously, we're in a very polarized period in our politics, but this defies any sense of common sense.
As we speak, some of your colleagues are down there today.
There's regular trips down there. The speaker took a whole group to Arizona the other day, and I know there's a group in Texas as well, the Homeland Security Committee. We've got a great delegation from New York. We've got several members on Homeland that are going to El Paso. We elected the largest Republican delegation from New York in 20 years last year. A lot of it's on the concept of law and order, and a lot of the campaigns were based on law and order, and our state's refusal to support the rule of law. With this bail reform that no one here asked for, they didn't consult any of our law enforcement officers. They didn't talk to our district attorneys. They did it in the name of social justice. And now every community in the state is paying the price, and our quality of life has suffered greatly. We've seen it play out in real time, and it's this immigrant crisis. It's manifesting itself there, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. You're seeing cold-blooded murder on a whole much more regular basis than you used to. So, it was my vast hope that New Yorkers would decide that they had made a grave mistake and make a different decision on governor last year. They didn't, and we'll work with who's there. But my hope is that she'll see the error of her policy's ways. Eventually, people have to stop voting against their own best interests. And I know it's not the voters here in Allegheny County that made this decision, but they got to get out of their own way because they're hurting all of us. And supporting law and order is something that I will always do. Support our police and anyone that wears a uniform. those folks, when they leave home and they kiss their husband or wife goodbye, there's no guarantee you're coming home, especially in this day and age. And for anyone that puts that uniform on today, after the scrutiny and the nonsense that's been fed to our police officers, and the attacks on their integrity that we've seen in the last several years across this country, I really commend them all the more.
Congressman, I'm sorry to interrupt. We do have a question in the way back. I couldn't tell if you could see or not. If you could find a microphone for your question. Mr. Durham, did you have one? Oh, Mr. Shaler. Okay. Press the button on the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kier. He's my straight man. I'm Randy Shaler. I'm mayor of Wellsville. Congressman, I too would like to thank you for being here. It's very warming to us to have you here and have you listen to our concerns. My question is, have you considered or will you consider expanding the definition of infrastructure to include what I would call lifestyle infrastructure, specifically something that we face in Wellsville, I think every village is certainly in the Northeast faces, and that's blight. And that is homes that are put into disrepair, homes that are abandoned, that type of thing. We find that there's a fair amount of opportunity for us to get grant money for rehab and for construction of facilities, but nobody has money for demolition. And my question to you is it possible to get something done for that type of infrastructure, which is so vital to the success of the small villages?
Well, Phil, for my team, we're going to research that. The one thing with the federal funding process, it's sometimes a little confusing versus the state. In the days when we had, Senate Republican majority, the local state senator might give them $4 or $5 million and say, you decide in your district what you want to spend. I don't have that luxury. We have to go fight for program dollars through competitive grants, which we will work directly with any municipality that wants to go pursue that, supporting those grant applications, helping you improve those grant applications however we can, by consulting the experts in the departments as to what is going to make this a winner. Secondly, the earmark process, it's got to go in a bill. It's got to be something. Now there's some things that the federal government just won't fund, like it won't build a new fire hall. The state could, but the federal government just doesn't build buildings for other layers of government. You pose an interesting question that I've never been asked. So we're going to get the answer to that as to, is there any, either through the competitive grants process or, directly, through the appropriations process that something like that could be done. We'll look into it. But that makes a lot of sense to me that there's houses in disrepair. They would be prime real estate if it was a new site. And sometimes you got to clean some things out to beautify and restore. So, you got a beautiful downtown, that's for sure. I think it was fun to march in that parade last summer for the 100th anniversary of the Texas Hot. But what time are they done for lunch? We should go over there afterwards.
You should come back on St. Patrick's Day. We are planning the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade, which will be 12 feet long.
That's enticing. Very enticing. But we will work for you on what your priorities are. And if there's a way to find funding, we'll try.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Congressman, sensing a little theme here, and I have a feeling you might have had some of the same conversations in Cattaraugus County. And since you mentioned the Farm Bill, there is a real problem in rural government in managing federal funding opportunities. If you look at the town of Angelica, doesn't have the money for big in-kind contributions towards competitive grants. Allegheny County, we're a $130 million budget, but we find challenges in finding staffing to perform 100-page grant applications. the technical knowledge needed to apply for grants, particularly federal grants, the follow-up administration of those grants. I guess it's more of a comment. My hope is when you guys fight your way through this farm bill, particularly some of the rural development pieces that come out of USDA and so forth, if you could keep that in mind, that what we need is direct funding, like Mr. Stockin suggested, as opposed to pass through the state. And we need a streamlined, simplified process for accessing federal funds. Any thoughts you have on that? And is that already on your radar?
Well, I know that I was a congressional staffer. It's been a while, but I worked as a district aide, and those competitive grants programs brought a lot of things home. The Fire Act in particular, it was one that we saw great success with rural fire departments. The counties that I worked in were Genesee, Orleans, Wyoming. Similar interests that we have here, but the local fire department couldn't afford those new carbon air packs, and you had our firemen wearing the big steel packs. So that was a breath of fresh air, and we'd bring in people from FEMA to help train whoever the local rep was on the fire department to prepare that application, give them the tips on how to make your application excel. But it does have to be chasing the monies and knowing the pots and where they all come from. I would be the first to admit, I've been on the job for 7 weeks now, so I certainly don't have the expertise necessary. And oftentimes a local official will tell me, hey, we're applying for this, and that's my first exposure to a particular program. If it's cumbersome, we need to look into it. And I happen to be on the oversight committee, so I'm happy to do that. But I would think that some of the investment from the county level on more either employees or a consulting relationship probably will pay for itself in time. To have, because there is an awful lot of state and federal, competitive grants out there. But if there is a simplification that we can achieve, I am all for that. But as long as it doesn't make our communities less competitive versus big urban areas. That is my fear, is that, your big urban areas will dominate if it's just all put out there.
I'll say that I don't think that a township or a village should have to find a consultant to navigate the federal funding process. If that's the case, I think it's probably a broken process.
Sure, I talk about as the county as a whole. There's obviously you're big enough to do that, but some of our townships and villages are very small. And their budgets are very small. But we will be an asset and work hard with anyone that wants to pursue pots of money as they exist. And if there's a way to streamline this process, we'll fight to do that too.
Thank you. Mr. Ricky, did you have something?
Yes, I appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, John.
I just met a farmer here the last week. He's probably the largest farmer in our county, close to 2,000 cows, and he needs three-phase electric so he can reduce his carbon footprint. That ought to make Albany happy, but that's what it's coming to. He needs to do a methane process. So is there anything out there for this guy to get three-phase delivered?
Well,
Thank you.
One, we have to, is it National Grid or NYSEG?
NYSEG, I believe.
NYSEG. I'd be interested to hear from them. You would think a big customer like that, they should want to be at the table to help give him the tools to buy their electricity at the needs that he has. I don't know that you're going to have federal earmark available for something, like that for a specific, commercial entity. The grid as a whole has to be improved. That's a drastic problem because their agenda calls for all of us to be driving around on electric cars and calls for all of our schools to have electric school buses, and all of our farm equipment should be replaced with electric farm equipment. But the problem is the grid couldn't handle that electricity on its best day. And as I talked to National Grid here a couple weeks ago, I asked the uncomfortable question of, all right, well, tell me where the electricity comes from. And I said, Niagara hydropower, how much is it? And they said, well, let's talk in terms of off-peak for the whole state for what goes into the grid. Niagara Falls in off-peak times is worth 20% of the grid. That's great. God-given resource. There we go. I said, what is natural gas component? And they said, almost the rest. So we can't have a natural gas hookup to a building. We can't, drill for natural gas here in Allegheny County and tap into this Marcellus Shale. But most of our electricity that they want us to be ultimately purely dependent on is all, for the most part, created by burning that same natural gas. I mean, this is just hypocrisy at its absolute finest. And we need to see investment in the grid. I think it would be staggering to figure out what the needs of the grid are. But, we also need all levels of government to stop treating, farms as, just local mom and pop shops. I mean, you got 2,000 head of cattle. That's a big business. And they need the assets to succeed because agriculture is still, the largest industry in upstate New York. We have to support the farmers. I'd really like the opportunity to go visit them. Maybe you can help me with that. But
Glad to. Thank you.
The three-phase electric. I mean, we got to have conversations between the utilities and those that are being mandated that they need this because it's not the first time I've heard this. It's going to come at great costs, just like putting this methane digester is going to be at great costs. And this is to satisfy their, a political agenda. This isn't going to really be a net carbon pot, all this discussion. I mean, they've created their own religion off of this. And if you don't go along with it, you're a denier. Well, I'm all for making more efficiencies, to improve battery technology, to make us cleaner, make our air and our water safer. But, all right, we're going to do all these things, and we're going to hamstring our entire economy into do this. We're going to indebt ourselves for generations. You think China's worried about that? Who do you think's taking all the coal out of this country now? You think India and Pakistan, that they're worried about how to make sure to keep their carbon footprint as small as possible? So we're going to punish the American economy while other actors in the world do exactly whatever they want to. It's not fair. You have to imply just plain old common sense to this. Let's do better every time. We don't have a lot of cars on the market anymore that are, 10, 11 miles a gallon. We got better. We got more efficient. The engines run better. And it came over time. And this electric car thing, maybe that is what the future will be based on. But I'm glad that not many of my neighbors were stuck in snowbanks during the blizzard in Buffalo with 70-mile-an-hour Arctic winds, because they'd be dead, without an internal combustion engine. The vilification and the war on fossil fuels is absolutely taking this country in the wrong direction. We can do better. We can be cleaner, and we can have goals for the future. But we can't outpace technology. Gary, you do have good questions.
Yes, sir. The last couple of days, the president's been over in Poland, and he offered to help Poland build a couple of new nuclear plants. But he doesn't help anybody in the United States build a nuclear plant. Nuclear is, as far as carbon, is as clean as anything. It does have problems, but everything has problems. I think that we should be pushing nuclear, especially with the new designs, the safety features that are now designed into these systems. Something like 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania is probably never going to happen again.
Safe nuclear's got to be at the table. It's got to be an all of the above strategy. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a place for your solar panels or your windmills if you really want them. I personally am not a big fan. If you want them, God bless you, they'll put, a little frosting on the cupcake in terms of what our needs are on the grid. Nuclear can solve some real problems. I wouldn't want to get into the knife fight of discussion of a siting of a nuclear power plant, because that's going to be another whole ball of wax. And can you imagine dealing with DEC in New York State on perhaps that? I mean, I don't think we got to worry about anyone opening up a new nuclear power plant probably in my life, just because the discussions will be so nasty and intense. If they won't let us drill for natural gas here, can you imagine saying, hey, let's build a couple nuclear power plants? There's plenty of places in the state that can handle it. And we certainly have the educated workforce that could do, amazing things. And, they shut the only nuclear power plant down in the Hudson Valley down. They don't really know how they're going to electrify New York anymore. Their needs are pretty big, especially if they're going to take natural gas hookups off of all the buildings. So, again, this climate agenda is just wrapped in hypocrisy. But safe nuclear with these small, modern reactors that are available now, they can, in other parts of the country, some of these are going up, and they're not going up because the administration's made it a priority. They're going up because business is making it a priority, and the needs are growing. But we have a lot of fights on our hands on the energy front, and it's going to go on in the future. I mean, I've got an eye to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee eventually, because I think that I can really serve the needs of this district from there. I mean, we made a valiant effort to get on, but the night before they decided no freshmen would enter the committee, and they shrunk the size of the committee. But that committee oversees healthcare and energy and so many other key areas that we deal with. But we'll continue to work on that. But nuclear has got to be part of that discussion, as well as all of our available clean energy alternatives like natural gas. I don't want to leave anyone here with a question. So.
Congressman, I think I heard you use the phrase common sense.
Does that disqualify me from government service?
No, but it sure does disqualify a whole lot of people down there.
You got that right.
I don't understand for the life of me where some of these people are coming from. I really don't. The president's in Ukraine. We're financing a proxy war against Russia, good, bad, or otherwise.
Sure.
And I can't buy, well, you either got to fight them over there, or you're going to fight them here. I don't know. It makes one almost lose hope for the future.
Yeah. I think we've got to ask. Well, it's a fair thought. How's that? We have to look at this Ukrainian funding very closely. I support the Ukrainian people. We have supported them mightily financially, $120 billion, maybe more, depending on whose math you look at. That's a lot of money. The fact that the president's on President's Day in the Ukraine, parading around as world hero. Meanwhile, we've got people in East Palestine, Ohio, that can't get answers from their federal government. I think it's an embarrassing black eye to the federal government, and it shows a mistaken priority. I'll never apologize to say I support America first, and I think that a lot of our solutions, if we, not saying we shouldn't be involved in important world affairs, it should never be our first choice to stick our nose in, but we have to take care of our citizens and our needs here before we go and solve all the problems of the rest of the world. And I hear the president talking about making sure that pensions are paid to the people of Ukraine. There's people that can't get their pension in this country because a company's swindled them out of it. You got to choose your words and decide on where this financing is going very, very carefully. There's a humanitarian side of this. There's making sure they have the money to go compete and fight against Vladimir Putin, who's a butcher. It needs to be stopped. But we can't have a blank check in Ukraine with no checks and balances, no accounting, and no oversight over that money.
Who's going to rebuild that country?
Unfortunately, I think there's too many people licking their chops figuring out who's going to go make the money off of rebuilding that country. Yes.
I'm going to ask one of the other questions.
Okay.
Recently, I was reading that Congress has showed a serious interest in reauthorizing Economic Development Administration, the EDA. I wondered what process they were in after coming off of the pandemic for this. I think it's probably something that's really important because I look at it as not really spending, but as an investment. And how will it operate? What phases are they at? And are there other resources or programs that we should be aware of?
I specifically as to Congress is looking at. I'm not sure where that is. I mean, we're going to look at every single department and find ways to drive money home, from the district. I think there should be heavy. The question on any investment is how will this help economic development? And it's I look at critical infrastructure first. One, you got an important water project. Well, any business is going to need water, needs power, needs the people's ability to get to and from work. Well, those critical infrastructure pieces need to be in place, and if there's a federal tie-in, I'd be happy to try to fight, for those. But we should always ask ourselves the question: how is this going to help us create some jobs? Because if we don't have jobs here, we can't have a sustainable future.
Return on investment.
Return on investment on every dollar. And these are important questions. Both will have a process that'll be handed down from the House, but also we'll have an internal process from my office as to does this satisfy what we would like to help you achieve. I mean, I'm not going to be the one coming to you saying, hey, Randy, I want to build this in Wellsville. That's not my job. Your job is to outline your priorities as to what your taxpayers need for Wellsville to succeed. And it's my job to help find something either out of existing spending or a way that we can, appropriate some new federal funds to get the job done. But, if there's going to be a better program coming out of Congress, I mean, a lot of this is going to be administration driven. Right. The House won't create as much as you'll see created out of the edicts of the White House. So, we're playing by those rules for now. We'll find, and sometimes you guys will find programs before, we'll be aware of them.
Do you think there's going to be a reauthorization for the EDA? I kind of wonder how helpful, listening to what you're saying and working with government in the past, if it just becomes
appropriated money is helpful if we could get it back home. And that's the thing. It's going out and fighting for it. So I think anything that helps us get rural communities to have economic development things available to them is a positive, and I'll look hard at it. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you for being here today, and you touched on most of the subjects that are near and dear to all of us. But getting back to economic development, and I agree with you, it's the best thing the state of New York could do for our area would be to have less do natural gas development via fracking. They would put so much money into the local area, and traditionally, local people invest their money locally. On the other level, economic development would cure many of our ills automatically, and it would provide good jobs. And I'm not talking about pork for one area or another area, but I'm talking about investing our money wisely and in projects that would continue to perpetuate themselves. Traditionally, the economic development has always followed the transportation corridors. If you look back through history, and that was a natural development. It's only recently that you could move mountains and put your transportation corridors wherever you wanted or wherever you wished for whatever reason. That being said, that we have one of the best intersections on 86 down at the crossroads, exit 30, and we recently lost a major project down there for a variety of reasons, one of which was perhaps a little bit, maybe we didn't have enough infrastructure down there. That'd be smart investment. Is there something you could help us with to get additional infrastructure down the crossroads?
I think we should discuss on ways that we could find on what the needs are, and work with your local, economic development team to, see what sort of vision they have, that they're out there trying to find businesses to come in. And is there, what specifically is lacking that we might be able to find some investment for?
Well, there's a lot of land down there.
All right, well, let's go
And
take a
it's out
look
of-
at it.
It's out of the floodplain,
Yeah.
most of it.
Right.
It's, could be developed. So there, we have that, and we have the major intersection in the county. It's in the center of the county. And so it would benefit the surrounding area. Probably nobody's going to live down there if whatever happens. The most new people that go to work down there, in whatever capacity it would be, but they would live in the surrounding communities. And anything went there, maybe perhaps on manufacturing level, obviously would those people have families and support our school systems, which is another issue here throughout New York State, but especially here in the southern tier, is our schools are dwindling.
We got to stop our population drain. The problem is you got a spread out county, you got a lot of school districts, and they're expensive to function. And this has been our narrative our whole lives, and upstate New York as a whole. We don't have growth. We have contraction, and we've said goodbye to too many of our loved ones, and too many of our young people. And so we have to first cauterize the wound. Making sure that there's some jobs and opportunity here. But the problem is New York State, in our current economic climate, you got to buy companies off to come here too often. You need a king's ransom to move some pieces. And, I think we're in kind of an agreement from our conversations on some of the things that could change it, but we need some support. Not from our local delegation, because they're with us on all of this. It's out of the decision makers in Albany, and I think that's important. Whenever someone from the governor's office, Empire State Development, they have to hear loud and clear, from your county government and townships and mayors, that these policies are killing us, and they're making people leave here all the faster. We're trying to do something, and it's an impediment to growth and progress. And will it be a 10-year? I don't know. But if you say it, our hope is someone will eventually listen and figure it out.
Well, as you mentioned, we have to bring a lot of our industries home. Farming them all out to overseas was not a smart thing to do for a variety of reasons, from a national security reason, number one. And as we bring them home, perhaps we want to be ready to see if we can capture some of those industries here in Allegheny County. Thank you.
100%. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Mr. Congressman, I know you have another meeting. I appreciate you going a little bit over our planned time. Is there anyone else with any questions before we lose them? If not, would you please join me in thanking the Congressman for being with us today?
Thank you very much.
Congressman, I hope this is the beginning of a trend and that you continue to come visit us whenever you can. We know you're busy down in D.C. We know you have a big district, but we certainly appreciate you coming and talking to us and addressing some of the issues particular to the southern tier in Allegheny County. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much. It's very important to me to hear from you. Our door is always open. We have I got an office in Olean, Lee. We're obviously also in Clarence and Erie County and Jamestown and Corning, in our team in Washington. But you're going to see a lot of me here. I said that during the campaign. It's the only speed I know. I will be out in this district working. I look to be in every corner of this county this year, and I want you to show it to me. So I need your help and to help us guide, the important decisions that are before us. So thank you guys very much for the opportunity. Really means a lot.